everything needs to be improved. So why are we improving it? Where has it gone wrong? And I mean, your first go-to point is just always looking at drop-off. Anyone who's been a product manager of an onboarding flow um,
Everyone
will
goes to the
know that.
onboarding flow as an
Yeah,
example.
you cannot tell LinkedIn you're a product manager unless you've done an onboarding flow.
I
Yeah, I
love
mean
that.
in Switzerland it was the biggest product that I'd ever done. So it was over 1 million converted users, so KYC'd users.
Sure.
So we had probably then 2 or 3 times that in terms of who had started the onboarding flow. And the insights we got from the data team were fantastic. It wasn't just they
Mm.
getting stuck there, it was why they're getting stuck there.
Welcome, builders, to How Would You Build It? The podcast that dives deep into the dynamic world of startups and product creation right here in South Africa and Africa. This show is more than just interviews. Every week, we sit down with the brilliant minds to provide a masterclass for building digital products amidst the challenges and opportunities unique to our continent. From seasoned founders to dynamic product managers, we uncover the unique stories and strategies behind some of the most innovative digital products being built. So for all the aspiring founders and product builders out there, you'll discover that each episode is a wealth of practical wisdom and local and actionable insights. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen to our podcasts and connect with us on social media for even more content. Now, let's dive into today's episode. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of How Would You Build It? And I'm very excited today because I've got someone that I've worked with in the past, or his company anyways. It's Jock. He's the head of product at Better Home Group, but he's also the founder of Now Boarding, where I met you and your team, Jock. So thank you for joining the podcast. It's really cool to have you here.
Thanks very much, Bobby. Excited to finally join the podcast. Been watching you guys for a while. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Now, I brought you on because, as with the name, How Would You Build It? It's all about building cool products, being innovative, and in this whole innovation space, shall we call it, but building startups. But it doesn't necessarily have to be startups. It could be corporates that are trying to sort of break into the innovation space, building cool new products and being ahead of the game. But Jock, the big thing about why I wanted to get some design insights on the podcast is because it seems to me, but even like back in the day when I worked with you guys, it's still undervalued. Design and the whole relationship within design and product and tech just still seems to be a bit broken. And do you feel the same way? Because you deal with a lot of different clients, different companies regularly. Do you feel the same way that the industry is still lagging?
Yeah, it's a fair statement. I definitely agree because I'm unapologetically biased. I'm heavily weighted on the design side. So
Yeah.
I think there's always gaps to be filled. But if I had to put myself in the shoes of a startup or maybe a medium-sized organization, I understand their pain points. There's development costs are huge, employing
Mm.
developers, and then you need product managers, you need analysts, data people, and then there's this sort of design component. And I think that, yeah, that part is sort of undervalued to me. The part that the design thinking, and it's not just design, design is the
Mhm.
output, but what happens before that is what we call design thinking. It's something that Steve Jobs often spoke about, and it's really about how you unpack a problem,
Mhm.
and that you almost can't do that without a user experience designer by your side. So whether you're a founder or a head of product or a product manager, if you don't have that person as your right-hand man, I think you are weaker in that time.
Mm.
So there is a sort of, I think people come to us very late in the day sometimes where they've already done it wrong, and then they want us to fix it. And sometimes they come to us too early when they don't even really know what they want to solve, and
Mm.
we try and help them get over that. But yeah, undervalued for sure. It's if you look at the line items in a project bill, this one is small. If you take
Mm.
an industry aggregate, the development costs people are putting in, and the operations cost and all that. And then you look at the line item, and I've got an eye on a few of these budgets, and it is remarkably
Yeah.
small.
Yeah. No, listen, tech is not cheap. And I think that's the whole point, right? I completely agree. So Marty Kagan just brought out a new book. So he's like all over the waves at the moment. But in essence, what he's talking about is how companies or just in general, I don't think it's just Marty Kagan. It's just that there's not enough emphasis on that discovery side of it. Everyone just runs into solutions and just starts building. And so that's like a big problem. It's like you know, design thinking is a framework where you get empathy and you start thinking about the problem, the user, and having, that understanding of who they are, first of all. Like, let's get those personas like pegged down. Like, who are you actually solving for before actually diving into the tech? We've had many a conversation on this podcast where that mantra of build it and they will come. So they go with the tech first approach, they build something, and then it lies flat. And it's like, damn, but why didn't we have, why isn't this working? They seem confused. And working closely with now boarding in the past, where I've worked with some of your people, and it was just so awesome to have, a design tech and myself around the table aligned and breaking down solutions together, so kind of being given a problem to solve, not being told how to solve it, but this is what we need to solve for. And a thoroughly great experience. And I know you guys have, what's the word, cultivated some great talent in there. So yeah, what's your take on like kind of getting the right people around the table and then making sure those conversations are being had?
Yeah, I mean, those early conversations are key, as you said, discovery processes. And I love it when data people and engineers and founders, especially, are a part of that. I think the way you kickstart a project, a product, or a feature within an existing product is key. That starting point, if you get that right, everything will flow. So get the right people in the room. It's not like you just need a designer and a product manager. You need multiple stakeholders to just open the door to the problem you're trying to solve. What I think, you mentioned something there, like what I think we tend to all do as human beings is be solution focused. And
Mm-hmm.
that's for me a little bit of a problem. You don't want to be solution focused in the discovery process. You really want to be problem focused or challenge focused. And
Mm.
that's been a big um, thing for me in the industry of trying to coach that so that our clients and our partners don't brief us with a fixed solution. You always
Yeah.
get the question, like, should I prototype it for you in Figma so you know exactly? I said, look, go for it. Draw as many pictures as you want, take screenshots, do what you want, but come with an open mind because that, if you do that for me, it'll be the best relationship we can have. But if you have a
Mm.
very fixed idea of what you want, we're going to struggle. And I can tell you it's happening daily at the moment where I'm
Mm.
working with product managers and they've been at past companies, so they've gained experience and they saw what worked at a past company, and now they want to implement that.
Mm.
And I was like, yeah, but we need to move the dial. We need to innovate. And if you bring all your past experience, that's the knowledge you store, but don't bring the solutions because that's
Mm.
not then innovating. And that's not necessarily solving today's problem. It's solving yesterday's problem.
Mm. I like that. That's so bloody true. I like that a lot. Okay, so what does an ideal project look like for you? Because like I've been chatting to people obviously in the product management space, and sometimes, you get those people, they're just so early in their journey that it's like you don't need a product manager yet. You need to figure out what you're trying to solve for first of all. Or, whatever it is, there's different scenarios. So you kind of get a feel for when the right project is or the right setup has been laid out for you. What does that ideal project look like for you? And so the right person comes to the door at the right time.
Yeah, I think, we've had people come to us, I think I mentioned earlier, when it's almost too early and they want us to help them validate, but almost to a point where I feel like if I keep going down this route, I might as well start the company myself because they really haven't tested anything. They haven't they haven't tested it with the
Yeah,
market. They haven't done enough research. They
exactly.
and I love startups. I love helping them. I love doing validation, love doing discovery, ideation. But I think you gave me the chance to tell you what the perfect scenario would be, and that would
Mm,
be when the idea is mature. So I love it when there's no existing tech, but the idea is very mature, as in they've done their R&D, they've got a proven target audience. Um, and they can pitch it. I think that's, when we talk about building product, it's so important to be able to articulate what you're doing, because you don't have to just do it to investors. You have to do it to your team. You have to do it to
Mm,
your service providers. You have to do it to your HR department. You have to inspire. Your job is to inspire. And um, that's another thing that just blows me away about, like, people, you jump on a call with them and they're just like,
can't sell their own idea.
you're fishing it. You're trying to get it out of them. And I think that's key. So for me, ideal scenario, someone comes very well researched, they know what they're talking about, um, they're prepared, and they know how to talk it through.
Mm,
And they have an open mind in terms of the tech. And
mm,
so that's a great starting point for us. Then we really want to understand their tech stack. We want to understand who's going to build it. What is that? How big is that team?
mm,
When we know things like that, we kind of start to get along. Okay, how complex should we be in the beginning or not? We just want to
mm,
gauge that, because obviously everyone wants every feature in the beginning, but if you get a gauge on their team, who they got backing them in terms of the building capability, then
mm-hmm,
as designers, we can go, okay, we really need to slow this down, simplify this, or phase this. So we'll then decide to design very much in phases so that they've got bite-sized chunks to solve and conquer as they go as a team. And then you can
mm,
do faster iterative releases.
mm.
Um,
It's
and
such a basic
yeah,
concept that people just don't seem
it's
to have. It freaks me
it's
out.
it's
I joke
totally
on this.
basic.
Yeah, it's like let's iterate, let's build small. Like everyone knows the term MVP, but they don't quite understand how it fits into the greater picture. So once you got your MVP, you can start your iterations. But people
Yeah.
just want to build these massive chunks, and they're not happy until they have all their features, and then just keep chucking more features on, and it gets a bit hairy. But yeah.
I've been in a situation where we did anything but MVP before, and this was while I was spending time overseas in Switzerland, working for a very well-funded startup. But we did completely not do MVP. We did bells and whistles. We did
Oh, is
the
it?
Rolls-Royce of apps. It took us 2 years to produce it, but it was fine because I go back to that point. They had the team. They
Mm,
had they had enough money to on the spot hire 50 developers, iOS, Android specialists, backend specialists, and so they could back it. They could back it up. So I wasn't scared to go with some fancy features, some cool
mm,
animations, some really crafted stuff, because I knew they could back it up.
mm.
But in most cases in South Africa, yeah, you need to be lightweight. Um, you need to move fast, and those are the general rules of product startups. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you did a talk a while back about KYD, not quite KYC, which is know your designer, right? So let's say you've gotten to a point now, whether it's now boarding or just your average designer out there. You want to start working with them. You've got this concept of know your designer. Where's this coming from? Why is this important to you?
Yeah, I think it's because when you look at the makeup of a product environment, I think I always like to take a human approach. And I think for many, many years, I completely misunderstood developers. And they gamed in dark spaces for hours and hours, and I wanted to go walk on the mountain. But then I discovered a few of them also like that. And I guess, yeah, I just put them in a box. I said, developers, a
Yeah,
developer's a developer. Um, and over the years, just built up some fantastic relationships and gotten to know developers a lot better. And and then as you broaden the team with product managers, and I always think the one that gets sidelined even more than designers sometimes is sort of data analysts.
100%.
And then you can also talk about like UX researchers, also undervalued,
Mm-hmm.
and user testers and so on, or QAs. But yeah, I kind of felt like if we feel like design is undervalued, let's put ourselves on the map a little bit and talk about who we are and what we need out of the equation. And also just to recognize that I think designers are a certain breed. Um, I don't like to put people in a box, but I think putting our careers in a box is okay. It's to say like, yeah, there's certain things we like, And you can really pick up common denominators in the industry of like what makes a designer tick. And like the number one thing is like getting a good brief. That's like getting a brief that includes some data points, getting a brief that includes some user research. It's just like just makes our world. But then on the more human side, that yeah, we come from a creative background originally. I think it's almost a fear of mine with AI and with the way schools are teaching UX. I always said like UX you can learn, but design you need to get an education in. And so when we were hiring for Now Boarding, we always looked for like, a really strong design background. Did you
Yeah.
understand space? Did you understand typography? Do you understand
Mm.
color? If you've missed those fundamentals, you can see it. You can really
Mm.
see it in the execution of an interface. And so a lot of people have moved towards UX, which is sort of like the user journey, the user
Mm.
experience. But at Now Boarding, we believe that really you cannot do one without the other.
Yeah.
So you can't execute a great user experience unless you've given the design a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into all sorts of facets like, color, space, interaction, sound, vibration, feeling.
Yeah.
And and I think that having that artistic creative background helps a lot. It's not to say that
Mm.
it's not possible to become a great UX designer without that. I mean, we typically would look for like a 3-year design diploma, or if they'd studied art and then later gone into design naturally, that would be fine because they've done something where they've really explored the creative side. And I also believe that the creative side of your brain helps the innovation side. So if you are
Yeah.
taught to solve UX problems, you're not necessarily thinking outside the box. You're just kind of mathematically solving that problem. But when you use the left side of the brain, you're going, stop. How could we do this differently?
Mm.
And I've mentioned Apple and Steve Jobs earlier, but the one thing about product is that what he did is he didn't go and do user research and find personas. He just said, this, I believe this is what people
Mm-hmm.
would want.
Yeah.
And so I always keep 20% of that in my back pocket. I always say, like, cool, I want the user research, I want the data point, but what happens if we do it differently?
Mm.
And to me, that's what makes a designer, is
Okay.
a designer who's willing to listen, to craft, and then to innovate. So I hope I've summed that up a bit.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what's interesting, I want to just double down on is coming from a product management perspective. I love the idea of having those data points. I'm going to take a step back and say I completely agree with you because I feel like I can talk to someone if they've got that UI background because UX can be taught. It can be kind of like brought on with a bit of practice, a bit of insights, a bit of mentoring. You can become good at UX. You can understand the principles that exist and the sort of industry standards that exist. You can kind of develop it. But UI is just like there's just something there. If you don't have that creative side of you, just doesn't connect. And that's another thing I loved about Now Boarding is you had all these unicorns working for you where they had both. But anyway, so I just wanted to double down on agreeing with that. Like I also feel like I've become to understand the same, right? But now I want to just touch on those data points. Like if someone comes to you with the concept, they want some designing done. You're saying you need data points. What kind of data points do you need? What are you looking for? Can you give examples?
Yeah, I mean, there's always two phases to a project or a feature that you're working on. It might be before or after. You might be improving something that's already out there, or you're
Yeah,
doing something from day one.
optimizing
So
or starting new. Yeah.
yeah. So if I look at starting something from day one, it's a feature that hasn't existed before, then sure, I think it's acceptable to say less data points because you know, all you can really go by is what the competition are doing, how much money you could make. So I kind of a good starting point is also to understand how many people care. So if you've done some research, you can say like this is a pain point for X number of users, or
Mm.
we've looked at the market and or this is the most asked for feature on our wish list. So things like that would be data points. Very simple, right? It's not we're not talking like high-end data.
Yeah,
We're just
yeah,
saying like designers don't know that. they don't want to sit and read dashboards. That's the other thing. It's like, don't give them a link to a dashboard and say like, just I want to be told, here's your little golden nuggets to keep with you as you go on your design journey. This is the most voted feature
Mm,
by the community. I'll hold that
mm,
close to my heart. It's great.
mm. Yeah.
The other thing I always want to know is like, are there any data points from business? So like we plan to make X amount of money, or there needs to be a 10% increase in conversion, or anything like that, that I can really just understand that there's someone who's paying for this behind the scenes that has a certain expectation, and I can
Mm,
keep that with me as I go. So there's going to be much more high level, smaller data points when you start in a new feature. When
mm,
you go into like improving a feature, which I think is like the hardest part of product design, is like what we put out there sometimes, it will always need to be improved. Everything needs to be improved. So why are we improving it? Where has it gone wrong? And I mean, your first go-to point is just always looking at drop-off. You've got to, so anyone who's been a product manager of an onboarding flow, um,
Everyone
will
goes to the
know that,
onboarding flow as an
yeah,
example.
you cannot tell LinkedIn you're a product manager unless you've done an onboarding flow. And
I
yeah, I
love
mean,
that.
in Switzerland, it was the biggest product that I'd ever done. So it was over 1 million converted users, so KYC users.
Sure.
So we had probably then 2 or 3 times that in terms of who had started the onboarding flow. And the insights we got from the data team were fantastic, just of like, they wouldn't just tell you that that's the screen people drop off on. They went and dug a bit deeper, and then they got like someone to dig into the code and try and work out like, but why were they getting stuck there? It wasn't just they
Mm,
getting stuck there, it was why they getting stuck there.
mm.
And instead of like, everyone's instinct is to like change something because it feels like it's broken,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
sometimes it was just like the words on the screen,
Yeah.
you know. So
Hey.
the data team would sometimes push it over to the UX research team and say, go speak to people. We don't understand this.
Mm,
Or we could see that like, hey, it was all the users from North Africa who actually didn't ever want to use the app. They were just trying their luck to get the free 50 Rand that was coming with the onboarding. So those data points are so important, right? Is to know
mm,
like, and if you, my favorite word at the moment in design, and I'm going through it with my team every single day, is intent. Intentional design is so important.
mm.
And if you understand someone's intent is to claim the free reward, then you
Yeah.
don't have to care so much about that data. You can actually take that data, segment it, and care about the more valuable data.
Correct.
So I think that's kind of, I love it when there's a dedicated data analyst on a team. My request to them is always to go that little bit further, as
Mm.
in, imagine you are, as a data scientist, the founder of this team, and tomorrow you have to pitch to the team what
Why
you learned,
something?
why something
Okay.
went wrong, or what. And
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
and so instead of saying like, "Hey guys, here's 6 graphs that show what's going on." A graph is a great visual aid to something you're saying, but it's not saying it for you. So I love data people that just like really are able to filter it down to, and they're basically doing like, 75% of the work, because then you
Mm.
don't have to ask that many questions. You're like, okay, I totally get it. And
Yeah.
and I can solve that pretty easily. And I think that just has a knock-on effect of saving businesses time, which is ultimately money, because
Mm.
you have less designers, less engineers iterating, A/B testing, and all of that. When actually, I think a lot of the truth sits in the data. And maybe I just
Completely
want to,
agree.
add a sort of caveat,
Yeah.
which is that there are times, and maybe it's because I'm a designer, that I just ignore the data. And
So forget
and
everything you just said for the last 5 minutes.
definitely not, definitely not. But it's very rare. But it's
Mm.
when I'm willing to take a risk. And that's what I was speaking about, that little 20% of like,
Mm.
when I go
Oh, I
like,
see what you're saying.
don't think people know what they want.
Mm.
And I still want to fix it. So if there's a drop off, for example, on onboarding, what I think what I was told in those days was like, people just skip through the intro tour.
Yeah.
And so the PM said, your brief is to remove the tour. And I was like, but the tour is the thing that just positions us and sells this thing. And so I was a little bit like, so what happens if we do it differently? What happens if we just automatically play a video of the tour, but you can sign up if you're convinced? So it was a kind of a middle ground where I said like,
Mm.
okay, the data says drop the tour, but and then the PM turned it into a brief, but the designer is saying, can we do this differently?
I like
And
that.
and I, and I saw it in like an app for the first time, and and it wasn't my idea. I saw an app that did that, and I thought to myself, where did they get that idea from? Because the data would have told them always to do it a certain way.
Yeah.
And this is the question we're all asking ourselves about AI, right? Is we're all asking ourselves like, what is AI going to become when it can think for itself? Because at the moment, it's thinking predominantly based on data we've given it.
Yeah.
And that data could be biased, it could be pro-design, it could be anti-design,
Mm.
it could be you know, pro-react or anti-react. It could be so many things we
Yeah.
don't
I
know
think
at
a
the
can of worms
moment.
there.
I know the AI thing does tend to do that. But I think that for me is the interesting part, is that um, is AI going to be able to do what a human can do, and that is stop, pause,
Mm.
and can we do this any different way? And
Mm.
I have to keep reminding myself to do that, because I also
Mm.
fall into the solution, quick
Mm.
win, quick win, quick win, or else like, when you're on the clock, as in like, we charge for our time. So if you stop and think, you can also go around in circles, and that can cost the client. And so sometimes
Mm.
um, clients, say to us like, why is this design so expensive? And it's hard to tell them that like, well, for 10 hours I went around in circles thinking outside the box, and actually came back to the realization that the first one was right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. But what I like about what you've been talking about is that exactly what we were talking about earlier about iterations. So putting a design out there, getting the data to understand, not just saying it's failed, but to go and dig a little bit deeper into the problem of, where's the optimizations within what we first assumed, and how can we improve it? Because I think if people just jump, they just go from one thing to the next. They don't actually spend enough time kind of digging into the data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, like looking into it and trying. And that's why they keep talking about, experiments. I mean, an experiment doesn't have to be huge. It can be a small experiment just to kind of see. Like you said, another thing I also believe is underestimated. My wife is now a UX writer, so it's not just words on a screen. It's literally if you phrase something a little bit differently, you might get a whole different outcome. and
Yeah.
and I just don't think people are giving it enough time. So one of the things that you spoke about as a designer, know your designer, is having they're empathetic, they're kind of emotive thinkers, they're looking to understand the people that are using the products that you're designing for, right?
I think we used to position ourselves like that at Narbonne. This was like the early days of UX in South Africa, at least, where we said like, we represent the user in the room. And
Yes.
like, to say that now, it feels a bit silly, because if a product manager isn't representing the user in the room, then you've already got a
Mm,
problem, kind of thing. But that was, I think, a designer's mantra. Well, we are often empathetic. That is the idea behind sort of becoming a designer for end users, is that you just really care about that experience. You're so emotively invested in the experience. You want it to be beautiful. You want it to be easy. You want it to be, I get very worked up when clients not transparent with how the fees work. For example, if there's a product with fees, I had long debates about like, what is this smoke and mirrors? Like, why can't we just
mm.
be the company that says it costs this much, and that is the way it is? But maybe that's why I'm not a a founder of a startup. But um, yeah, so I think there is this amazing care, and I think in that talk that I gave, it was what I was asking people to do. I was saying like, when you get pushback from a designer, harness that investment that they're doing. They care so much about your user. And if you fight them on that, then you're going to end up in a situation where either one of you are disgruntled because you didn't get your way or whatever it is. But you've got to really harness the
Mm.
wind, so to speak, and say, like, this person is just there to create that. And all you can do is just guide them along the way.
I think it's quite important to actually, within the teams that you've got the designer in it, is to make sure that you've given them that agency to go and solve that problem, and so that they're invested in it. And I think that's what I enjoyed working with, again, with some of your team. It's like they were very passionate about solving the problem, and they were given the agency to go and try and figure out the best solution for what we were trying to build and design and all of that. And I think as soon as that happens, that's when you get innovation at its best, because people feel a lot more passionate about what they're doing, and they're more invested in making the best. And as you said, that we have the user at heart. Like, that's what we're looking out for when we're building and we're designing. Give them that rope so that they can go and do their best work, and that's when the great things come out of it. So it's like, hey, we want to solve onboarding, we need to get them through, past this phase of onboarding, otherwise they can't do XYZ. Go and solve that problem. Where is it breaking? And actually, that's where I also like your data. Get your data and understand, like, actually dig into it. Give them that opportunity to go and find out, instead. What was the terms you were using earlier? But like, build this, just go and build it, and you don't get the best solutions when that happens. It's painful.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. It was probably something I still struggle with as a director of designers, is knowing when to step back. I think, throughout my career, I was very hands-on. I was hands-on as a designer and then very hands-on as a director. And when you get it right, when you get that balance right, whether you're a product, a head of product, or a design director, or whatever, if you get the balance right about when to let them go, then they always astonish me with new ideas, new ways of doing something. And I have to stop myself and say, just hold your tongue, because there's something here. It wasn't the
Mm.
way you thought it would be, but there's something there.
Mm.
We recently did a hackathon, and
Oh, yeah.
it was
Ah, yes, Lee
it was
told me about it. Yeah.
yeah, it was a design hackathon, and we took the top 5 startups from South Africa that were awarded by the Heavy Chef team, and we said, for 2 days, give us a problem and we'll solve it from a design point of view. And a lot of the teams, they flew down to Cape Town, they brought their sort of some tech leads, so some developers with. So we had some very sort of analytical, technical minds there. So the first part of the morning, they were sharing that information with us. Really, it wasn't just handing over a brief, it was brainstorming a brief, which was
Amazing.
beautiful. And then, we would go in and check in with the teams from a direction point of view, just to give them some guidance. But then for the most part, we just we sent them on their own. And that, just the outcomes of that was just phenomenal. Just how, I think, for us as sort of leaders, it was a good exercise in letting go a little bit. And
Mm.
that it was a 2 days of true innovation. Like, they just really
Exactly.
pushed the envelope there, because they weren't held back by the typical environments that we tend to set up, because we all like organization and control. And sometimes you have to take a look at that and go, like, are you too controlling? Are you
Yeah.
um, and it goes back to where we started this conversation about, like, what does your brief look like? Is your brief too controlling? Are you trying
Mm.
to prescribe exactly what you want? Because
Versus.
ultimately it's not what you want, it's what the user wants, and there's many ways to get there.
Mm.
So yeah, there's
Yeah.
some lovely things to try.
Yeah. So one of the slides in your deck was about articulate the challenge and trust me to solve it. And I think that's amazing, right? So that's exactly what you just spoke to, which is like, trust the people, trust your designer to go and solve the problem for you. Like, let them, give them that agency, like we spoke about. Um, I'm just going through your deck, and you're like, keep the channels of communication open, which you've discussed, right? It's being transparent about understanding where things are, what's working, what's not working. Have we tried this solution? Is there anything from keep the channels of communication open that's important to you?
Yeah, I think maybe most importantly, it's, if you're scared to let someone go off, and I can understand being scared to go off, because we do have this as well, where if someone can go down too many rabbit holes and without good guidance, you can burn. I talk to my team a lot about the burn rate. And for me, the burn rate is when you keep iterating on something without an outcome.
Mm,
So, so what are your mini goals within a broad, bigger goal? And those
nice.
could be, what I say to the team is, if you get to a point where you're burning and you're not getting towards something, it means you haven't had a conversation.
Mm,
It could be with me, you just want to bounce something off because you're stuck, or in most cases, with the stakeholder, as in the PM, the client, whoever it is. And I think that that's key. So it goes hand in hand with saying, give your designer the freedom, but check in. And
mm,
they should know that as well. Those channels of communication are key. Midway through the design process, we often have questions about data, like, oh, but how many people would do this?
yeah.
And and I kind of say to the guys that just if you got them on Slack, send them a Slack, get the answer and
Mm,
carry on. Or else just avoid burn. And
yeah.
that's for me, like, especially in our context of South Africa, where, we're struggling to raise investment for our tech industry. So we do have to keep an eye that we are keeping things lean. It's our responsibility to not overspend in terms of design and development and so on. So I try and keep an eye on that. I try and say, like, I want everyone to leave now boarding thinking they're going to get bang for their buck. And
Mm,
if they ever don't have that feeling, they must pick up the phone and call us, because that's critical. So
mm,
understand that as designers, we need to innovate, so we will go down rabbit holes. But also, you can bring it. The client should be bringing us in. I should be bringing the team back in and just say, like, okay, let's recenter ourselves. Um, it's a lovely metaphor. I've just started throwing clay on a wheel, and so it's sort of pottery, but you do it on a
mm-hmm.
on a wheel, and you cannot do anything unless you center, and so that's sort of for me, like, what I'm trying to bring into my world is, like,
I like that.
if everything needs to be centered, and as soon as you get to a point where it's too wobbly, literally when you're doing pottery on a wheel, the thing will fly off if it wobbles too much. It just, like,
Mm,
there's a very cool way of telling you, like, you're not centered.
mm,
And it's kind of what I look for in my world is exactly that. Like, once I've gone off track and we're not moving the dial, then bring it
mm,
back. Bring it back to a
yeah.
center point, balance it with some good decision making. Um, know when to cut ties with that idea. And it's I think the more I think designers picked it up with experience. And anyone in product really is, like, I'm sure
Mm,
developers have it all the time when they go down rabbit holes in their code. And an experienced developer will know when to
yeah.
park that for a rainy day.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I think we can use that metaphor in many ways with all the founders. It's like, center, focus, come back to the middle. I really like that a lot. So you can use that metaphor
Yeah.
for a lot of things.
I guess it also goes, I always, when I look at founders and how they just juggling so many balls, and I think
Mm,
that who said it? Someone said the other day, like, the master of um or someone who can do many things is the master of none. I've
yeah.
completely screwed up that
Jack of all
expression.
trades, master of none.
That's it. Thank you. And
So mine
yeah,
is a jack of all trades, master of some.
master of some. There you go. That, which is also fair. Like, I mean, that's the what I see with founders is they're juggling so many balls, and not just founders, but people in high up positions, and that's just their life. That's the world that they've
Mm,
entered into. And then it comes, for me, the centering is knowing what to do with your time, because your time is only
it's
so
precious.
much,
Hmm.
and the best people know what to do,
Yeah.
and I admire them for that.
Yeah. So I must say something that I actually learned again working with you guys was when you talk about channels of communication, something that I really love when I know that I've got a good UX or designer on board is the questions they ask. And I think it goes to what you were saying earlier about, if you're feeling stuck somewhere, just go ask the question. But it's like once you get a good designer on the team, they're poking holes, they're asking the questions, they're trying to understand, they're getting those data points, and I love that. And as soon as I have somebody starting to ask good questions, I get excited from a design perspective. If they're asking good questions, I get excited because then innovation's coming because they're looking at it from a good perspective, and now we can start unpacking it. And I love that because they challenge your thinking, they're challenging your insights, they're challenging, asking the question. Actually sometimes it's just a curiosity, it's just trying to figure out into what's going to work here, and I love that. So I think that's a big lesson, is make sure to ask the questions. Don't be shy, don't get stuck in your bubble. Like, open, go ask. You said open the Slack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just, from designer, but also the other way around. Like I think the way that product managers sort of respond to designs that are given to them. I mean, I always get a real kick out of it when I'm challenged in the right way.
Nice.
If I'm challenged in the way that is like it didn't go the way that they thought it would be, then I'm kind
Mm,
of like, okay, fine. But if they start to ask really good questions, which make me question my own design, we're in a beautiful space. Um,
mm,
and and I think like, yeah, it comes with experience, but product
mm,
managers who are able to sort of digest and then really get to the meaty bits quickly with good
mm,
questions. That's a
mm.
beautiful place.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. Now I have the tech in there and asking the same questions and
Yeah.
challenging. That's the beauty, right? I love
Ooh,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
There
And
is there is
something
there is
that,
a world. Yeah.
yeah, I just hope that that's what I want out of this conversation, is for people to just try and build that environment within your startups, within your businesses, with whether it's corporate or not, is, get the team together, get your designer around the table, give them the opportunity to have a voice with the tech team, with the product managers. I think that is so, so important. And I think that's what people are missing. They're missing two main things. It's that discovery part, it's that brainstorming, it's kind of giving agency to solve problems with those three people. I think that's, and I think that we need to make it a common, because the three is becoming normal. But I think Jacques, we should go out there and say it's four. It's your data people need to be around the table as well. If you get those four people around the table and answering the questions, poking holes, validating, that's where you're building good products. You're building products that meet those outcomes that you were talking about earlier. I want to emphasize your business goals, product goals, there's learning goals. And yeah, get those people around the table and understand which goal we're trying to achieve here. Is it a product goal? Is it an onboarding goal? Is it a business goal? Is it ROI? So yeah, I think that's where people, if there's anything I would love to take out of this conversation, is just please get the right people around the table to solve problems.
Yeah, and I just thought we kind of stumbled across that as a kind of a theme, but I think that that is also what I've been picking up from this conversation with you is just how important the dynamic and the balance of an
Mm,
ecosystem is. That's
correct.
really, I guess, where we're going. It should be easy to put the right people there, and if you're not doing that, do it because if you
Mm,
don't have a designer in the room, add one because it's a no-brainer. The best
exactly.
companies in the world have them. It's not rocket science, but finding the right dynamic between them. Look, designers and data people and developers, they can clash and they can clash with founders, they can clash with product managers.
Mm,
So finding the right dynamic is really the the healthy ecosystem that you're after.
mm,
Um, but they, and what we're really saying is like, trust in the characters that are there
yeah,
and give them the platform to do what they do best. And
correct.
yeah,
And I think that's a leadership thing, right? So the leaders need to create the culture within the company to allow for that. And I think that's another thing. First, they need to understand that they need to create it, because it's almost like an unknown unknown. Like they don't realize that they need to create an environment for these people to sit around the table and help solve their problems for them. You don't have to
yeah,
be involved, and give them the agencies to do it. And another word that popped into my mind while you were talking is context. So bringing the people in early on into
yeah,
the conversation so that everyone has context down the line. Because as soon as you have context, you understand why people don't like. I always bring this up at Sweep South. It was like, we've tried that, it didn't work. People come in, they're like, why haven't you done this? It's like, well, we did and it didn't work. It's context is king. And like,
yeah. yeah.
bringing those people around the table from the beginning so that you can carry it through and have that momentum. So key.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned it. We were guilty of that for many years at Now Boarding of the directors had the context, but not the designers. And they called us on it. And so then that was the start. And it was good many years ago. It was the start where we said, we're no longer client facing. The designers are now client facing.
Mm,
And so that they finally had the context, the communication channels were open.
there we go.
And we were protecting them, we thought, and we were protecting the client. We wanted to be super professional with the client, so we were the better
Yeah.
speakers or whatever. But
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
once we
interesting.
empowered them, it really changed the game, and that's when we really became a proper product agency as opposed to just the sort of like design service.
Love
That
it.
was a very telling moment. Yeah,
I love that. And I think the last thing that you said in your talk, which is give us human feedback. And I love that because you're going to give them agency. Let us know how it's going. Let us know, did you like it? Was it good? Is it working? Like give us the feedback, because that feedback starts those iterations, because you take that feedback and you start implementing it in your new iterations. So I love that.
yeah, yeah. I think the problem with data is it is overlooked. So like many companies have a Google Analytics dashboard somewhere, right? But it's not the first thing that they look at. And so it's often months later that that data gets crunched. And what you actually want to do is if you say you publishing a new website or a web app is like you want to set yourself like a 3 month goal of like going back and bringing the designer into that conversation. Because if the stakeholders aren't learning, then you've
Mm,
lost a huge opportunity there to
yeah.
even if it's just educate someone, educate a
Mm,
designer that like that practice didn't work. And
mm,
we should be sharing these learnings more openly, I feel.
yeah.
That was
Totally
yeah,
agree.
and maybe the human part about that was, don't send me a link to a dashboard. Um, tell
Yeah.
me, tell
Yeah.
me, tell
Let's
me
have a
what you saw.
conversation.
Let's have a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
in this digital world where, like there's nothing better than that little human
Yeah.
interaction. It just
100%.
makes us so much more invested, which just triggers like the last point that I maybe want to share today, which was about passion. I think just spoke to my team about it the other day about like why are we doing this? And I think it exists in product all the time. Like you can get really stuck in the day-to-day
Mm.
technicalities of your job, of the industry. Maybe you've been fighting with the legal department on the terms of use checkbox that is not allowed to be automatically
Are you going to
selected.
give me a Twitch? I just had to solve
Yeah,
that recently.
yeah, exactly. And that's sort of like our day to day. It's normal. And I just like said to the team, like, let's remind ourselves like why we do this.
Mm,
It's like absolutely because we love it. Like we love solving
mm,
problems for users. We love creating delight for users. We love and and if we're talking about this discussion being like an ecosystem, then make sure like that is somewhere in there. If you notice that it's not there, then something needs to be tweaked. And sometimes these things don't need an overhaul. They just need a
mm.
little adjustment. And
Agreed.
um, I think I'll
Can go a
take
long
from this
way.
conversation, yeah, the sort of like this ambition to create the utopia of ecosystems that is just beautifully balanced, has all the relevant stakeholders, and everyone is driven with passion. And
Mm.
then, oh, geez, the things that South Africa can do, hey?
Exactly. Well, Jock, this is the one of the things that I say is like I feel like that's where we're falling short. Just think of all the cool problems and innovations that we could create if people just understood these principles a bit better. We take them for granted we're in the industry, but we need to share these learnings, because that's what creates, well, that's what solves big problems, and we all know we've got big problems to solve. So I love that ending. I think we need to finish it there, but that was great because I agree 100%. But Jock, thank you very much for joining. Thanks
Thanks
very
very
much.
much. Thanks, Bobby, for having me.
Yeah,
Lekker.
cool,
All
man.
right.
Cheers, Jock.